Right now, it seems as if the entire world is focused on the war in Ukraine. But for almost a decade, another war has raged in the Middle East that many people don't even know is happening. A war that many of our governments are supporting, that's going unnoticed by the vast majority of the population. But it's also a financial war. A war fueling an economy of weapons manufacturers and profiteering. And it's a war that is making many people very, very rich. I'm talking about the war in Yemen and how it is filled with controversy and accusations of wrongdoing. But mostly, I want to talk about who is fueling the funding behind these wars and how it is possibly not just the governments to blame for making millions of dollars from this conflict, but many other people as well. In fact, it could be that you are fueling the war in Yemen right now as we speak of it without even knowing about it. So let's talk about it, how to not fuel the war in Yemen and also many others like it around the world. With that out of the way, just letting you know we do have an amazing newsletter that people rave about. We have 50,000 plus subscribers that love it. Link in bio to find out more. On the 16th of September 2014 is when the rebels overthrew the government, and this is considered to be the start of the war in Yemen. In 2015, a coalition of Middle Eastern and African nations began fighting back against the rebels in Yemen, led by Saudi Arabia. The alliance also includes nations like the UAE, Egypt, and Kuwait. Nearly 400,000 people have been killed since the start of the war over 8 years ago. And since United Nations human rights monitors were removed from the country last year, civilian deaths have doubled. Forces on both sides have been accused of human rights abuses, with much of the critical accusations being directed at Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Long story short, it's war, and war is always terrible. Now, I would love to discuss the geopolitics around the war in Yemen and the nations surrounding it, but I am going to be sticking to my own lane and talk about the financial aspects that are happening behind the scenes. Mostly how many companies are using the war in order to get rich, and how a lot of our individual friends, neighbors, and countrymen are as well. When Barack Obama was president, he had a chief of staff at one time called Emmanuel, and Emmanuel is famous for quoting this. He said, "You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. It provides the opportunity to do things that were not possible to do before." At the time, he wasn't speaking about Yemen, but it seems his words were taken to heart by the president, who decided to apply that thinking to the field of war. During his time as president, Barack Obama received the Nobel Peace Prize, and I do struggle to understand why, because for a man of peace, he sure seemed to enjoy his nation profiting off war. Obama signed off on more weapon sales than any other president since World War II. During his term as president, he offered Saudi Arabia over $115 billion in arms, and billions more to other nations involved in the war in Yemen. Eventually, Obama left office, but unfortunately, that didn't mean the weapon sales stopped. As president, Donald Trump proposed more than $110 billion in new arms sales to Saudi Arabia. And although Joe Biden initially said he was going to stop selling arms to the nation, it seems that might have been a carefully crafted lie. Because just a few months ago, Uncle Joe agreed to ship the Saudis more than $500 million worth of new weapons. Weapons that more than likely are being used in Yemen today. At this point, you might be thinking, well, I'm not American. It's not really my problem. My nation isn't selling weapons to countries that are bombing Yemen. Well, not so fast. Canada, Germany, Spain, the United Kingdom, Belgium, Italy, and France all sell weapons of war to Saudi Arabia, as well as other nations involved in the war in Yemen. And unfortunately, so does my cute home country of Australia. A country usually known for Vegemite and kangaroos, and not usually known for selling weapons of war. Australia, though, is a little bit more sneaky about selling weapons to nations that are getting accused of war crimes. Although the Guardian newspaper did manage to get documents proving Australia was selling weapons to the UAE and Saudi Arabia via Freedom of Information, the documents were heavily redacted, and the Australian Department of Defence refused to reveal exactly what kinds of weapons have been sold or for how much. Basically, many of our nations are very happy to be making money off war, but it is not just nations, because there are dozens of huge companies making millions of dollars collectively from the horrors of war. Boeing, the same company that makes airliners you've flown on many times before, also make weapons. A lot of weapons. In fact, they are the second largest producer of instruments of death on the planet. Since the war in Yemen started, Boeing has supplied Saudi Arabia with over $20 billion in military equipment and arms, including the sale of more than 150 attack helicopters and fighter jets. And fragments of Boeing's satellite guidance systems have been found among the wreckage caused by bombs used with their technology. Bombs that have potentially been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of innocent people. But Boeing isn't the only company that is profiting off a war that is filled with human rights abuses. Lockheed Martin has sold over $7 billion in arms so far to Saudi Arabia, including warships, targeting systems, and Hellfire missiles. Raytheon has provided them with guided bombs and missiles worth almost $2 billion in total. And General Electric, the company that makes washing machines, dryers, and microwaves, also makes weapons as well. Over the last decade, they've made more than $1 billion from the weapons they've sold to Saudi Arabia. These companies collectively have made billions of dollars from the war in Yemen, with a small side effect of killing almost 500,000 innocent people. But no large companies like this can take the blame on their own. They wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the shareholders that invest in them. Since the war in Yemen started, Boeing's share price has increased by over 30% in value. Raytheon's stock price has nearly doubled, and Lockheed Martin has almost tripled in value. And considering these companies have millions of shareholders around the world, that's a lot of people who are knowingly profiting off war. But here's where things get a little bit more complicated, because there are millions of people around the world that aren't directly investing in the stocks of these weapons companies, but they still might be funding the companies, and they might be funding them without even knowing it. Apart from allowing our governments to be selling weapons abroad, how else is the average person potentially funding the war in Yemen? Well, it comes in the form of the most common ways that people invest in the stock market today, which is exchange-traded funds, otherwise known as ETFs. An ETF is a way of investing in the stock market to diversify your portfolio and reduce risk, all while making it easier for you to grow your money. An example of an ETF is the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, which allows people to invest in all of the biggest 500 companies in the United States at once. But instead of having to buy 500 individual shares, you buy just one share of the ETF, which owns a part of all these 500 companies. But of course, the world's biggest weapons manufacturers are part of the list of 500 companies as well. So, by investing in a mainstream ETF like the S&P 500, you're also investing in Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, General Electric, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman, companies who make their profits from death, including in Yemen. Basically, if you've ever invested in a major ETF, most likely you are supporting the war in Yemen, but also if you haven't directly ever purchased an ETF, you might still be funding the war anyway. Many of the world's banks invest their customers' money into ETFs as a way to invest the capital they have on hand. And if you've got money in a pension fund, there's also a good chance it's being invested into an ETF as well. Not only that, but investment firms like Vanguard, who create the ETFs that contain weapons makers, also own huge chunks of our banks. In fact, Vanguard is the single largest investor in some of the biggest banks on the planet in countries like the United States, Australia, Germany, and many more. So just by having your money held in an account with a major bank, it likely means your cash is finding its way to fund war somewhere on the planet. As you can see from what I've shared so far, it becomes very important to find out what your investment money is supporting. But not only that, it is finding out what your bank is doing with the money you entrust to them that is sitting in your bank account right now. And so this leads me to the final puzzle piece of how we can pool our support of the conflict in Yemen and similar conflicts like it. You have the power. Money is the main way that we exchange value in the world today, but it is also a storyteller. And to read this story, money is trying to tell us about the conflict in Yemen. You just have to see how money is flowing there. Or as I've said on this channel before, follow the money. By following the money, it's easy to discover who the people and organizations are that may be benefiting from making sure this war continues. For example, how our pension funds and banks are fueling our cash into war, as well as how governments are supporting wars we may not agree with by using our tax dollars. It may feel like you're powerless to stop any of this happening, but that is not true. You absolutely have the power in order to stop money flowing towards conflicts like this. And it is by potentially removing the money from your ETFs and investing somewhere else, or pulling your money out of banks that do support death through war and making sure that your friends and family do the same. You can also help make a change by emailing, writing, or tweeting at relevant politicians or the office to the Ministry of Defense in your country. Basically, to air your concerns to the people who are directly responsible for allocating your tax dollars to pay for bombs being dropped in the Middle East. Or even more simply, share this video around, because the more people that know where their money is flowing, the more that people can do something about it. Look at it this way. If 100,000 people see this video, that is 100,000 people that are likely to do something about the fact that their nations are profiting off war, and that could collectively result in billions of dollars not reaching the hands of weapons makers. The alternative, well, you could do nothing. And in that case, nothing is going to change. It's all going to remain the same. But I do believe that together we have so much more power that we are being led to believe. And just remember that if we want change, it is up to us to make that happen. Thank you for watching. If you would like to help yourself get on the path of financial freedom, our latest course, The Manual, is at 30% off pre-sale right now for a limited time only. So if you wanted to find out more, there's a link on the screen or down below. Otherwise, remember we have that amazing newsletter that people rave about, link in bio. And finally, make sure that you like, comment, share, subscribe. We would love to have you part of the community, and I will see you in the next one.